Welcome back. I'm Dr. George Curry, and we're here with our special guest, Valerie Lumley, who's written the book Curing Chronic Fibromyalgia. And we're going to talk about a breakthrough that she had to help cure this devastating condition. Let's talk about when you started to get an idea and discover the actual cause, if you will.
Well, I think from the very beginning, I had a basic instinct about what was causing it and where it was coming from, and I had a diagram and a list of questions that I took to each and every doctor, but I was summarily dismissed by each and every one. And I finally got to a doctor, as I say, that would give me a partial diagnosis that was correct. And
now, let me just stop you there, because this is something that I know that people in the viewing audience, and I get in my office practicing nearly 30 years, when you say dismissed, they're saying, well, that we can't find a physical cause, so it must be in your head. Were they pointing to psychological factors?
Yeah, when I went through 15 doctors, that unfortunately, it was because I would hear something in my gut that wasn't really true to what I knew. I was listening to my inner guide, and I would just quietly learn to say, you're so fired. I'm not going to continue with you, and I would go someplace else. And that puts me, ironically, in the category of doctor shopping, which is one of the criterion for hypochondriasis. And I was called an hysterical hypochondriac at one point. And so you just continue to go.
It's not called good consumerism?
Yeah, or supporting the local economy or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And so I would try to convince the doctors that there are really alternative therapies that are legitimate. It's not just all fairy dust from a bunch of new age chicken spankers, as it were, But I couldn't get doctors to listen to me on that regard, so I kept going. And finally, I found an osteopath who palpated and found a problem and confirmed my suspicions, and then I went on from there.
Well, as you know, and the viewing audience may or may not know, that traditional trained osteopath is trained to examine the spine and to look for spinal malfunctions. At least that's how the profession was originally founded. It's kind of morphed more into a medical type profession. But so the first clue was examining the spine and say, hey, something's just not quite right with the spine.
Yeah, I always knew it was something to do with the central nervous system, because naturally that was my primary malfunction. And it was, to me, a malfunction of the central nervous system, not a disease. Just something was out of order. And it was my job for myself I'm an analytical type of person, and I enjoy organizing things, and I just use the same type of tenacity. My own motto in life is life belongs to the tenacious. I like that one. And I just use the same discipline and tenacity that I would learn a 350-page lead role in an opera, and I took that discipline and applied it to researching, and researched for 10 years.
Well, sometimes
continued looking at different alternatives.
Sometimes it's amazing to think that anyone who's trained in any type of health profession, certainly the cornerstone of education is the anatomy and physiology of the body. It's studied for years. And when you look at the central nervous system, which you alluded to, when you look it up in Gray's Anatomy, it states that the central nervous system, its purpose is to control and coordinate every tissue, cell, and organ in the body.
Every biological function.
Every biological function. So it's the source of the source, source of the force that's guiding and animating and controlling not just some of your functions, all of your functions. So when the body breaks down, and it breaks down in a major way, such as fibromyalgia, to ignore an insult that may be occurring to the central nervous system just boggles the mind.
Or if you're getting a lot of drugs to suppress the symptoms, that's just saying, here, put a Band-Aid over the oil light in your car dashboard and continue to drive your car. And anybody knows if you do that, it's just going to fall apart and break down and explode at the end.
It's a failed paradigm. So thankfully, you found your way. Maybe someone recommended you, but you saw an osteopath, he examined your spine, said something's not right.
Well, as soon as he confirmed my suspicions, I asked him, I said, okay, is there someone that can correct this? And then he referred me to a local chiropractor.
And so the chiropractor, of course, being trained to make specific adjustments for a condition known as a subluxation, and a subluxation is described as when a bone in the spine is out of alignment and blocking the nerves, causing a loss of health. And so you started to get some benefit, I guess, right away?
Well, I told him my story and my theory of cause, and he agreed with me completely. He said it's absolutely feasible, and he confirmed what the osteopath said, and he told me that I had a misalignment in my atlas vertebrae, and it was the worst misalignment he'd seen in his 15-year career, and that my atlas was out a half a thumb to the left, and if it was out any farther than that, I would have probably ended up like Christopher Reeves.
Right, right. So just for those, again, for those who are watching, the atlas is a term that's given to describe the very, very top bone in the neck.
Yes.
It's round, circular shaped bone, and it sits right below the skull. So everyone has a hole in the back of your head, and it's called the foramen magnum, which is Latin for large hole. And your brain cannot communicate with any part of your body unless it is allowed to send messages through an extension of the brain, which is the medulla oblongata, the brain stem, if you will.
Right.
And the brain stem goes through this hole in the skull, and then it passes through the very, very top bone in the neck, which is called the atlas. And the atlas moves differently than all the other vertebrae, and it actually pivots around the second bone in the neck on this post. So if you see that there's a hole that goes through there, that's the hole through which the spinal cord connects to the brain stem, and it goes right through the center of the atlas and through the center of the underlying vertebrae.
Right.
So so in order to have a clear connection, if you will, but from the brain cell to all the tissue cells, that atlas has to be maintained in integrity. It has to have its
100% alignment.
100% alignment. Anything short of that is going to have an effect. And not only will it affect the spinal cord, but it will affect the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid.
Right. It distorts all the signals coming from the hypothalamus through the brainstem and into the spinal cord.
Right.
And they're called distortion signals. And what happens is that, like Dr. Curry was saying, when the atlas is misaligned or subluxated like that, it becomes torque on the spine. And you can see that creates a little smaller opening for the brainstem to go through the spine, go through the atlas into the spine, and it actually pinches it. It's called the kink subluxation.
Exactly.
And the kink subluxation creates effects like the brainstem injury, the distortion signals, and when all the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that controls your biological functions through the signals, and also you have the nociception system of your body, the non-nociceptive afferent system and the nociceptive afferent systems. That means when the nociceptive system is when you're touched, it just feels like a pressure or an inert sensation. When it becomes hyperactivated by the kink subluxation, touch becomes painful, and pain becomes excruciating. So if you just, you nick something or you bump something, it's just like someone's hit you with a club. Or if someone touches you, it's, ow, don't touch me. So everything is heightened.
Heightened. Yeah, I
Right.
like to refer to it as like a car alarm that's set to notify if someone breaks into your car, but it could be set at such a sensitive level that someone just closes their car door next to your car, and suddenly the alarm goes off. It's
Right.
hyper sensitized,
And the alarms is the fight or flight.
Fight or flight.
The fight or flight feeling that it's the feeling that something death related is happening, and it is a slow death.
Right.
And at one point I did feel like I was dying because my body was actually shutting itself down.
Right.
One system after another was just closing on me.
Right.
So you do feel like you're in a life or death situation.
The power is lost. So let's go back now. You were examined, and the upper cervical chiropractor discovered that
The cause was confirmed.
Cause was confirmed. They did an X-ray, an analysis, found and you started to receive adjustments. And how quickly did you start to feel the life start to return in your body?
Well, my chiropractor was so concerned about making me worse because I had received so much medical abuse and so much treatment abuse and had been made worse so many times and over-treated the wrong way.
Your body must have been
My
toxic
body
for
was
years of dumping chemicals.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the muscles were tight and sludgy from toxins and no circulation and no oxygen getting to the muscles and so forth. So it was a complete body overhaul and rehabilitation that needed to be done, starting with the alignment of the atlas vertebrae and the compensative subluxations that the atlas causes, because when you have a 15-pound bowling ball that's off to one side and you're not lined up totally on point, your whole body scolioses and compensates. And so I had a dysfunctional hip, a frozen shoulder, problems with my knees and ankles, a foreshortened leg, ribs popping out. I was being turned into a C from spasms, and the whole body had to be rehabilitated, and my spine had compensated subluxations from the pressure of the weight of my skull being off for so many years. I was that way for 13 years.
Right. There's kind of an unwinding that has to take place.
Unwinding, definitely.
And those who are watching, just so you know, one of the side effects of an atlas subluxation is that postural distortion.
Right.
So you may look at someone at home, with your family members,
right.
or someone who is suffering, look in the mirror, look at a photograph that you've had, and you might see a head that's tilted, you might see one shoulder that's higher than the other,
right.
you might see your hips that are imbalanced.
Well, a good way to do it too is your